Well, the Sky Cricket Podcast is on the move today. We're recording this at 10 to 6 in the morning local time, Barbados, but we're about to catch the England charter to go to Guyana. About a 9 o'clock flight this morning. Of course, the semi-finalists are now confirmed. It is India against England, and it is South Africa against Afghanistan. So this is being recorded very early on the morning after Afghanistan's remarkable win over Bangladesh last night to send them into the World Cup semi-final for the very first time. Morning, Nas. We should have a shout out to our friend in the pizza joint last night. Our Pakistan supporting friend who came over for a selfie and was on his honeymoon and said he brought his new wife to Barbados in the hope of watching Pakistan, but suddenly found himself with tickets for England against USA in a game that didn't last very long. So he was a bit downcast, but he was having a nice pizza anyway. How are you this morning?
Yeah, his wife was absolutely thrilled, wasn't she? I mean, long-suffering Pakistan fan, poor lad. He had a massive smile on his face. He came over, had a chat. I think he's enjoyed his trip and the honeymoon. I'm fine this morning, actually. It is early, so I'm not as my happiest best, but I'm good. I caught most of the Afghanistan game last night, and we're going to look back at all the Super 8s and look forward to those two semi-finals. But that's got to be the story of the tournament, isn't it? The Afghan story. And how long before you abuse me for my tip, Australia, my gold tip before the tournament, Australia would win this thing. Well, they're making their way home, as with the Pakistan fans.
You should hang your head in shame. Of course, the three of us, myself, you, and Morgs, had our picks before the tournament began on one of these podcasts. Morgs went for India. Well, he's looking pretty good at the moment. I went for South Africa. Myself and Morgs. When you know, we just got the unbeaten teams in this tournament.
All I would say,
your sorry tail is between your legs because Australia, your pick, are going home.
All I would say is that Owen Morgan said there is absolutely no chance of South Africa. Sorry, Owen Morgan, white ball legend and the best thinker of the game, said there is no chance of South Africa winning this thing, and they are 7 from 7. So I am keeping an eye on that semi-final in Trinidad as well.
That's a cute deflection from your miserable pick of Australia, who clearly had no chance of winning this thing.
The moment they talked about kicking England out of the tournament, they've disappeared themselves. So what a nightmare.
I should shout out to Ricardo, our man behind the bar here at our hotel as well. I got a late beer last night after we came back from the pizza, and he said, you've got another listener. He was kind of reflecting on the fact that we thought we might have one listener in the British Virgin Islands last week. He said, I'm an avid listener. So Ricardo behind the bar, if he's listening to this, good morning. And he was a bit mournful as well because West Indies have gone out, of course, the local story, the home story of West Indies going out. So let's reflect a little bit on one or two of the teams not going through to the semis who've not got out of the Super 8 stage. West Indies, they gave it a good go, but I don't know. I didn't feel their bowling in the end was quite good enough. Certainly in that game where they got beat to England. It's England's only win against a test-playing nation, I suppose, at the moment. I just didn't feel that their bowling was quite good enough. England went after Mario Shepherd, went after Andre Russell a little bit. They seemed to chop and change. They obviously had an injury at the top of the order. But then when you go into a critical Super 8 clash with a new opening combination, very different looking bowling attack as well, just didn't feel that they were quite good enough in the end.
Yeah, I thought the same. I mean, obviously that was a belter of a pitch. So if you had any slight weakness in your bowling, that St. Lucia pitch, the one under lights that we did, England West Indies, was probably the best we've seen in the tournament. You could argue the best of the tournament. So if you did have any weakness in the bowling, that would show up on that surface. But their batters kept coming, didn't they? Hitters. Then they had the injury to Brandon King. And then very Darren Sammy-like, actually. Darren Sammy, and I mean this in a nice way, and I go back to Owen Morgan himself, quite stubborn. And what he wants, he'll carry on with. So I was surprised leading up into such a big game, they did change their opening combination, having already had one change then they leave Johnson Charles out as well. So it was disappointing because obviously in this tournament, like you say, everywhere we go, we sit here, outside. I was going to say by the pool, but that'll make everyone a little bit jealous. And they've got it on their phones and they're talking West Indies cricket. It's one thing that's come out of this tournament. They absolutely love their cricket out here. And I know we say that over the years, but you always wonder, has that diminished? They didn't make the 50 over World Cup. This was their home hosting the thing, and the love of the game. They may have not turned up in numbers, maybe because of ticket prices or availability or 10:30 starts, but crikey, do they love their cricket. They've got it on in the background. Everyone you speak to, are we going to win? What happened last night? Are England? They want England. I don't know, maybe because of, the amount of Brit supporters out here and it'll help the economy, but they want England to go through. So, yeah, it was in the end disappointing that they're not there in the knockout stage. But, they've made a decent journey. Like I say, they were off the pace in white ball cricket for a while. And it looks like they're on a path back, but that won't be much.
There's no question that there's talent around the region for sure, given, it's a very small population when you throw all the islands together, and Guyana, it's only about 5 million people, I think, but there's still a tremendous amount of talent here. And as you say, never confuse maybe the lack of people in the ground with a lack of interest. There may be many reasons why people can't get to the ground, whether it's the starts that you mentioned, the ticket prices, day games, but certainly that interest was there. And a double disappointment for me, because I felt the most moving moments of the tournament actually have been when David Rudder has sung the great anthem, Rally Round the West Indies. He sung it in Trinidad, first of all. He sung it in Barbados and then Antigua. And he's 71 now. He's got Parkinson's, so he's a bit frailer than he was. And yet his anthem has never sounded more haunting or more beautiful than when he sang it, particularly here, I thought, in the USA game. It was an absolutely full Kensington Oval. Philip Spooner, who's the kind of guy who used to look after the media from the West Indies side, he's now been working on this tournament. He's been seconded to ICC, I think. But he said he's a local boy and he's been to Barbados and Kensington many, many times. He said he's never been at the ground and felt the kind of emotion that there was when David Rudder was singing that. So there'll be no more David Rudder at the ground, sadly, because West Indies have gone. Who else should we talk about? Bangladesh, Australia, USA. What about USA? I mean, in the end, their tournament just ran out of steam, didn't it? But they gave them a good account of themselves and gave the tournament a good crack.
Yeah, I think they'd be disappointed with the way it ended, because they were a lot better than that. I mean, if you compare the start with the end, that is a complete drop-off. And that's probably what will disappoint their players, Stuart Law, their coach, because they have some individually, they have some very, very fine players. And the way they played against Canada and then beating Pakistan, these are the sort of things they want to do, because that increases the profile of cricket in America, So it was a disappointing end. But I think if you have a look at the tournament as a whole and the way it was done and the way it captured the imagination of some Americans, let's not push it too far. It's not, front and center all over America. I was there twice. You go into a sports bar, and I was trying to watch the other games. If I finished a game in Dallas or New York, I'd go and there'd be another game on here in the Caribbean. And it's just not on. It's baseball, it's American football, it's golf. It's just not on. So, and that was one of the things that was a little bit disappointing. Actually, to get it in America and watch it in America, cricket is still quite tricky. But their actual cricket team, I think, really put on a superb show, really. I mean, I was there in Canada, and the way they, against Canada, the way they played, Aaron Jones, Andreas Goose at the top of the order, Netravalka, excellent tournament. They had individuals that had really good tournaments. So I think there is something there to work on. I think Major League Cricket will take that to another level. We've been with commentators here, and a lot of them are talking about Major League Cricket and the impact. They've made signings already. The likes of Pat Cummins is going across there, Marcus Stoinis. They'll make even bigger signings. So I think that out of all the franchises, the one with the growth, I think, is probably Major League Cricket, and then the Olympics. So it's a good start for American, or trying to get cricket into America, I say, and that should go down to the team and the players and the way they played. Because if they'd been a complete, shambles and lost every game like they lost against England, then that would obviously really made a dent to what they're trying to achieve out there. What did you make out of them?
Well, I felt they ran out of steam in the end. They got whacked, didn't they, at Kensington against West Indies and England. But just speaking to Aaron Jones there, I did the presentation at the end, had a quick chat with him. Born in New York but raised in Barbados. He'd had a real thrill, I think, to play at the Kensington a couple of times, and led his side, obviously in the absence of the injured captain, led his side with distinction, I think. It was always going to be too much in the end, but they gave it a good crack. Should we get on to your team, Australia? Your team.
That doesn't sit comfortably with me, by the way. Get onto your team, Australia.
I mean, their tournament, your team's tournament, went south the moment Josh Hazlewood popped up to talk about putting England out on net run rate. The next game, they dropped 6 catches against Scotland, and then they've been beaten twice since then. So what are your reflections on that?
If we go back one stage, when they hammered England here in Barbados, you were absolutely distraught. You turned to me and went, "Oh, your tip looked really good, Nas. How do you get these tips so spot on? You're so ahead of the curve, Nas." And I was strolling around thinking I've absolutely nailed this. And I just don't know what happened there. I mean, catching and fielding, they started poorly with the fielding in the 50-over World Cup. I did a game in Lucknow where they dropped a load of catches, which was so un-Australian. And then they picked up and they were absolutely brilliant. But in this tournament, I guess you get a Super 8 and you can't afford a slip-up. You just cannot afford. And Afghanistan that is not. I said to you before the tournament started, if you lose to Afghanistan, whoever you are, that's not an upset. Even South Africa in the semi-final, that's not going to be an upset. So they lost that one. And then obviously you're under pressure because you got India. You got the mighty India. So I think, I don't know, just that they just faded away. Their big names faded away. Hazlewood himself, actually, in that last game against India, when it was carnage, bowled beautifully. So whether the pressure of that comment, making that comment, and whether you just take your eye off the ball a little bit and like, oh, shall we, shan't we? I can't imagine an Australian side thinking like that ever. But, just sort of, what should we do about the England situation? How are we going to play this against Scotland? It's a sort of lesson maybe in just focus completely on just winning the game, every game. I'm sure they did that, to be honest. I'm sure it's just T20, your eye off the ball a little bit. Other sides will do you, really. So very disappointing for Australia and me.
Yeah, it's a lesson, really, never to listen to you and your tips before the big game. So the semi-finalists are sorted. Should we talk about the vagaries of this competition's organisation? England haven't been to Guyana for many, many years. I think they're going there for the first time since 2010. So it might be a wake-up call for one or two of their players who think of the Caribbean as golden sands and blue seas. Guyana on the South American mainland, very different. We of course played Test cricket there, so looking forward to going back to Georgetown. Trinidad is the other semi-final, but obviously the way this tournament is organised, India knew that they were going to be in Guyana if they got through to the semi-finals. For reasons of the Indian television audience, that game starts at 10:30 in the morning, which is more favourable to the Indian television audience. But what it's meant is that there's a difference between the two semi-finals. So the second semi-final, for example, which is England's and India's semi-final, doesn't have a rain day. So if there's rain on that game, whoever finished first in their group goes through. And secondly, India knew that they were going to be in Guyana for the semi-final, therefore could plan for it. Their logistics were already in tow. And for Indian supporters, a chance to get to Georgetown, which England fans won't have had the chance to do because it's so late. So the vagaries of the organisation have put pressure on the organising of the tournament, and it's meant that the two different semi-finals are played to slightly different rules and regs.
Yeah, I mean that's the anomaly. You can't have two semi-finals with two different playing conditions. That one has a rain day and the other one doesn't. I mean, the actual time I think is 250 minutes that they can make up. The first one is made up over 2 days effectively, or a day and a half. The second one, the England-India game, is made up over that whole day. So we could rock up at 8 in the morning for a 10:30 start and still be there at 10 o'clock on night trying to finish off that game, or whatever the time may be. So, you know, my thoughts are, why have you left it so late, is my point. The sort of first part of the tournament seemed to meander along a little bit with the long gaps. If you think of England's schedule right at the start, they were waiting for a lot of cricket, then it rained, wait for a bit more cricket. You could have sort of got those games a bit closer together, and then at the end, at the real business end, why have you just got
scrambling to get around?
Yeah, why have you just got one day between a crucial second semi-final and a final, one in Guyana and the other in Barbados? So that's why it's a 10:30 start. I'm trying to explain to our one listener out there that that's why the second one's a 10:30 start, is because the players, the teams, the officials have to then fly to Barbados for the Saturday game. And because it's a 10:30 start, that's why it's given to India, because of the TV audience in India, their biggest audience. So not just India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, that part of the world, their biggest TV audience for the ICC need the 10:30 start. So I'm trying to explain why India were told that would be their game. But so the two things that really get to me is the fact that why is it so cramped at the end, and the fans. You know, we've been here traveling around, and you see fans. I saw a South African in St. Lucia that traveled around, and he was talking about how difficult it has been to try and get tickets, to try and get to the next venue, internal flights. You know, we have someone that we both follow on Twitter, Innocent Bystander. He managed to get to St. Lucia to watch the England, who were they playing? An England game in St. Lucia, and then fly here to Barbados to watch West Indies take on the USA. So it has been quite tricky to sort out flights. And you can imagine they're all trying to scramble around now to get flights for the semi-final and then the final. And that makes it so tricky when you leave it so late. So I do feel for fans. I don't know in any other sport whether the fans would have been so sort of last minute trying to get your ticket sorted. What do you think?
Well, you often never know where you're going to be in the semi-final. You know, if you remember the 50 over World Cup in India, you didn't know whether you're going to be in Kolkata, or Mumbai, and often people were trying to buy two tickets for two different teams. But I guess it's the difference that one semi-final is at 8:30 under lights, one semi-final is at 10:30 in the morning. One team knew that they were going to that semi-final. And I don't think that's ideal at all. Should we look forward to the games, though? I mean, they're two cracking games. The first one is South Africa, Afghanistan. Afghanistan, a great story. I mean, I was just looking at Mazza, our stats man, who tweeted out this morning, 16 years ago, Afghanistan were in Division 5 of the ICC World Cricket League and were playing against the likes of Japan, Singapore, Botswana, etc. Today, they're in the semi-final of the ICC T20 World Cup. So it is a remarkable story. I mean, we've talked about it many times, written about it many times. But the fact that this is now their first World Cup semi-final, I mean, some of the scenes last night in Kabul, if you're looking on social media, you know, thousands and thousands of people on the streets celebrating. And you just had to see the emotion on Rashid Khan's face. I mean, towards the end of the innings, when it didn't look as though it was going right for Afghanistan, you know, he's hurling his bat around, and there's so much kind of pent-up emotion there and desperation to get through to this World Cup semi-final, and now they're there.
Yeah, I mean, you were there in Mumbai. They should have got through in the 50 over World Cup. Yeah. So don't just put this down to, oh, it's a slightly shorter format and therefore you get these anomalies that sides like Afghanistan can get through. That is nonsense. They are the most improved cricketing nation in the last 5 years, as you say, from those stats, because of the ability they have in that side. And because of that ability, it's sort of reciprocal. Because they have so much ability, they are needed by franchises and wanted by franchises. You look at the IPL, you look at the 100, you look at Big Bash, whatever. Everyone wants these Afghanistan players. Rashid Khan probably the most sought after, but others as well. So then they, a little bit like England's 50 over side, because then they're wanted. Under Morgan, England's 50 over side, then they get even better. They travel, they get more experience. They've got so much ability, so much passion, so much love for the game. I think the coaching has been good. I think Jonathan Trott is really good for them. That passion you talk about that they show, that aggression behind the scenes, someone like Trotty just sort of calms them down. We know Jonathan very well. He's a calming sort of influence. You see him on the sideline, he's not going absolutely ballistic. He's quite a calm influence. So I think that's a good combination. And they seem to stick together. You look at that Afghanistan, because they've done very well, you look at that side and there's not too much chopping and changing. It's pretty much the side that's been there for the last 18 months. So that Darren Sammy last minute change to a different opening combination, I think they stick with their players, and those players keep to improve. And it's a sort of lesson maybe for Bangladesh, I'd say. We haven't really touched on Bangladesh in this tournament. And that's all I'd say of any team when you come in. Bangladesh have been in for a very, very long time now. And that loss to Afghanistan last night, they've got to ask themselves questions. Why are Afghanistan improving the way they are? They haven't got a home Afghanistan. They don't play at home for obvious reasons. They play away from home. They're home in the Middle East. So why are they improving? And Bangladesh are sort of plodding along, disappointing their large fan base that they have out there. So
do you think a semi-final under lights favours South Africa?
I was thinking that, but they have two or three very good seamers.
Yeah.
It's whether, I don't know, in Trinidad, whether there will be a bit of deal or anything like that. You'd want the spinners to be able to hold the ball, obviously, but I think an older Afghanistan side, when they were starting off, who relied heavily on spin and relied heavily on Rashid Khan and his 4 overs, I think that might have been an issue. But I think this one with, Naveen and Fazilat Faruqi and Gulbuddin and people like that, I think they have very good seam options. So, but obviously they would have preferred a day game and a dry pitch against South Africa, but it's under lights in Trinidad.
And my team, South Africa, unbeaten, but I have to say, not quite at their best, but unbeaten. And the question is really, when you get through a few tight games, so they've beaten Nepal by 1 run, they've beaten Bangladesh by 4 runs. They had that very tight tense game against West Indies at the end of the Super Race, which effectively became a quarter-final, a knockout game. I asked Owen this the other day when we were just chatting by the ground, and said, is that an advantage, having come through some tough games and being battle hardened and ready to go and knowing that your nerves held up? Or is it a disadvantage because you've expended so much mental energy getting to this stage, and only time will tell what it will be? But I've been impressed by Aidan Markram's captaincy, I have to say. I think he looks calm and collected in the field, and looks intuitive as well, the way that he used his bowlers the other day. He didn't stick to a plan. He put himself on for 4 overs and kept Rabada till the end. So he's prepared to do things slightly differently. Just chatting to a few of the South African journalists who know the domestic scene there better than we do, talking about his captaincy of the franchise team that he's led to 2 titles there, and of course was a former under-19 World Cup winning captain. So, I mean, there's a lot of heartache when you talk about South Africa and World Cups, given what's happened in 92, the pre-DRS game semi-final against England, the 96 run out in the final over, the 2003 DRS calamity with Polly, and the 2015 semi-final in Auckland. So there's a lot of heartache there, and there's a feeling that this may be their time. Who knows?
Well, they'll have to go, obviously now, they'll have to go unbeaten throughout the tournament. What a story that would be.
Don't say. Brilliant, Nas. I don't know where you get these things from. In order to win it, they're going to have to remain unbeaten. I mean, really?
It is fine. What is it now? It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Do me a favour, please. That is some deep insight and punditry from me, that. Yeah, look, Owen actually answered that he thinks those games take too much out of you. So when you're going into a semi-final, whatever, you want a fairly easy run because all those close games, and nearly every game has been a close game, takes a lot. So I don't know. I think those close games make you tougher.
Yeah.
The next time you get to the next close game, you have a bit of confidence. Well, we've been through 4 or 5 close games. We can win this one from this situation. I think it's a mental battle. It has to be, especially in knockout cricket. Those games you mentioned there, the heartache has come in knockout cricket, right? That's when we're going to come on to India as well. There's a bit there, but the heartache for South Africa historically has come in this at this stage. So that's when I agree with you about Markham. He seems very switched on. When you do the toss with Aiden Markham, you can see in his eyes here is a tough, tough character. So this is the stage now. And you asked him before we set off on this tournament, you asked Owen this, and we were discussing it in one of the podcasts. How do you mentally block away all those scars you've had? I actually think by winning close games, because by definition, you get to a semi-final and final, most of those games are pressure close because the difference between the sides isn't that much. England, India isn't that much. So it's getting over the line. And I think the fact that they have done will stand them in good stead for 1, possibly 2 more games ahead.
Second game then, England, India in Georgetown. Day game, 10:30 start. The Providence Stadium, which is the new ground, or not so new now, but was the one built after the 2007 World Cup.
So 17 years ago, then that new ground.
not that new. Yeah. As opposed to the old ground, that's what I'm trying to say, okay, as opposed to the old border. Right. And India unbeaten like South Africa, so 2 unbeaten sides, India the other. And I have to say, I thought they looked very strong against Australia. With Rohit, a barnstorming innings at the top of the order. He led the way there, much as he did in that 50-over World Cup when you were very sweet on his game and his batting there. I mean, he really put his foot down, didn't he, in that game against Australia. But Kohli can't get any runs at the top of the order with him.
Yeah, I'll leave you to tell the world that you think Kohli should be dropped for a semi-final or whatever. Listen, we were there in the 50-over World Cup, and it was blatantly obvious that what Rohit Sharma in particular, and probably Rahul Dravid as well, what they were trying to do was change that mentality of, we were also there in Adelaide for the semi-final, repeat of the semi-final that we're having in a couple of days' time. That India-England game where they just plodded along in the semi in Adelaide, in a power play, didn't go anywhere, got a well below par score, just plodding along with all the talent they've got. And then England in Hales and Butler just smashed it and won it with 10 wickets to spare. I think the change in mentality happened after that World T20 semi-final in Adelaide, and that was noticeable in India in the 50-over World Cup, and it was definitely noticeable as we've gone through this tournament. As they moved away from New York, they couldn't quite do it in New York because of the pitches. The pitches were poor, and it wasn't a surface to go out and express yourself. But as their batters have got a bit of confidence, some of them, not all of them, then they've gone back to that mentality, and it is completely led by Rohit Sharma. If you're going to talk the talk as a captain, and he did before the Australia game, he said, I'm not worried about 50s and 100s. I'm worried about what comes after the score, the ball's face, the strike rate. And that was one of the great white ball innings I've seen, what he did against Australia. Elegant, absolute, brutal elegance at its best, taking down Stark, slog sweeping Cummins, inside out over extra cover. That was one of the best innings visually I've ever seen. It was just outstanding. And then you have Rishabh Pant, who does exactly the same. You have Hardik Pandya, you have Surya Kumar that does exactly the same. So it'll be interesting for them. Can they do it in a knockout game? Exactly the same mentality in a group stage. Even if they lost against Australia, they'd have probably gone through. So there's no jeopardy there. There's no just go out and express yourself and we may have another day. You do it in a semi-final and then you suddenly seize up a little bit. There is no coming back from that. So that's the key for them. Go out and do it in a knockout game or in a final if you get there.
And have England stumbled upon the right team now? I mean, they played a day game against USA the other day, and they've brought in kind of Curran and Jordan now for Jacks and Wood. I can't see that they're going to change that unless the conditions look, very markedly different from what we'll expect. I can't see that they'll change that. And I feel they've stumbled on the right side eventually. It's taken them a bit of time to get there, but I feel that that's the best combination now.
I would say that, but what I'll also say about this England side is they really just do turn up and look at conditions. It was slightly different because the rain game against Namibia or whatever, they suddenly sort of leave out Wood and Jacks and play, they played Jordan and who else came in? Curran. So that's why the subtle change happened. But then they go away from that and then they go back to that. So I think what they really are, and you should argue that's exactly what you should do, play the side for the conditions. Now, I've been looking at that Guyana pitch and everyone's saying spin a little bit there. It's a bit lower and slower. And England haven't played there for a long time. So they will turn up and just pick the side for the conditions. But you'd say Jordan would be very difficult to leave out now because it gives them just that bit more batting depth. I thought in the game against South Africa, just with Joff coming in at 8, Jofra Archer, and you could see Sam Curran didn't trust him. And I know Sam Curran was hitting with the wind leg side, but Sam Curran turned down a single, and you shouldn't really be turning down a single to your number 8. You should say, well, you can win us this game as well. So if Jordan had been 8, maybe that Jordan would have gone on strike. So they want that batting depth. They want Jordan in the field. They want the death bowling of Jordan, which you may well need against India with Hardik Pandya towards the end of that innings playing well. So I wouldn't say stumbled, but I think they've just gone picked on each situation, each pitch, and actually now they look a side that are getting better with every game.
Pick your winners then. Who's the final going to be between?
South Africa and England, I'm going to go. England, that semi-final, they go in with that memory of that semi-final at Adelaide. And as I say, this is a repeat. And I don't think this England side fear India, unless it's a very dry, slow pitch. That's the only thing I'd say about this England batting lineup. And I know they just whacked Butler and Salt just whacked the USA. But if you look at when the balls come onto the bat, St. Lucia against the West Indies, they look absolutely brilliant. When it's just holding a little bit, the day game, you did that pitch report on the day game of South Africa, when it's just holding and a bit slower and a bit drier, the batting looks a little bit vulnerable. And if it's a bit dry and a bit slow and a bit low, that will play massively into India's hands. So I'm going England, South Africa, but it could well be an all subcontinent Afghanistan India final. Who knows? Who are you going with? You have been absolutely spot on so far. 7 from 7, South Africa. You're going 9 from 9, South Africa, are you?
Yeah, Nasser thinks India are not good enough, and I think that England are going to beat India in Guyana, and I think South Africa are going to be too good for Afghanistan in Trinidad. So it's going to be an England-South Africa final.
And South Africa are still going to win it. From what you've seen, South Africa are still going to win it.
I don't know. I'm wavering. I'm wavering, but at least I'm in the hunt, which is more than can be said for you. Before we sign off, there's lots of cricket going on at home. We're back in county championship mode there, but there was an England Lions against a Young Lions game. And did you see who were on opposite sides in that match?
We're getting old, aren't we? I mean, I'm going to have to commentate on your lad.
This was Archie Vaughan against Rocky Flintoff.
I know.
Both of them were in the runs. I think Archie Vaughan got 80 odd. Rocky Flintoff got 100. He looks a player.
Yeah.
He's a bit younger than Archie. He's only 16, I think. He's just finished his GCSEs. Anyway, it's nice to see.
I saw a picture of young Josh De Carey's at Liverpool, walking off. His head was down below his knees, walking off. I thought he got a duck or something. He got 90. I mean, you've got to celebrate getting 90. Have a word with your lad. 90 is a good score for an Atherton or a Josh De Carey's.
Well, he was also playing. It was Lancashire's second 11 against Middlesex's second 11. He was also playing against the young Flintoff, the other young Flintoff, Corey Flintoff. Anyway, that's for another day. We've got to cut this short because we've got to get on the flight, which is leaving in about 2 hours' time to Georgetown. England will be desperately hoping that there's no rain in Georgetown because that second semi-final doesn't have a rain day. And if there's rain in Guyana, as there often is at this time of year, then the team that finishes top of the group goes through, and that ain't England. So fingers crossed for good weather there. And we will do another podcast at the end after the final when we know who's in the final, which way it's gone, who's come out on top. We'll do another podcast to review the whole tournament. So hopefully we'll see you then.